"I dare you to say that again." Chase Dillard said it loud, so the whole table would hear. He had half-turned from his friends, one elbow hooked on the bar, and he was looking down the length of the room at the woman on the last stool. His face was easy and certain. He was 25 years old. He had a trident on his chest and 3 beers in his hand, and he had decided that the quiet woman at the end of the bar was going to be the joke that carried the night. 3 seconds earlier, she had said something. Not to him. She had been looking at the muted television over the register, at the map graphic behind the anchor, and she had murmured, almost to herself, that the ridge ran north, not east. That was all. A small correction, offered to no one, the way a person fixes a thing out of long habit and does not expect to be heard. She had not meant it for him. She rarely meant anything for anyone anymore. But he had heard it, and now he wanted the room to watch him make her regret it. The bar sat 2 miles from the base, on a strip of cracked asphalt between a tackle shop and a shuttered laundromat. It was a low place with a plank floor worn pale down the middle and a wall of unit patches gone gray behind the register. It smelled of old beer and salt air and the lemon oil somebody rubbed into the wood every morning. The television played with the sound off. On most nights, the loudest thing in the room was the ice machine dropping a load into the bin. Tonight, the loudest thing was Dillard. He had come in with 5 others, all of them young, all of them loud in the particular way of men who are good at a dangerous job and have not yet been humbled by it. They had pushed 2 tables together in the middle of the room, and they had been telling stories for an hour, each one bigger than the last, the way it goes. And Dillard told the biggest ones. He had a good voice for it. He knew where to pause. The others gave him the room because he took it, and because he was the kind of man other men give the room to at 25, before life teaches them what it costs. The woman on the last stool did not look up when he spoke. She held a glass of club soda with a wedge of lime in it, and she held it the way some people hold a tool they have held 10,000 times, with no wasted motion, the whole hand quiet around it. She wore a plain blue shirt, and her gray and white hair was pulled back off a face that had been out in weather. She looked like somebody's aunt who had walked into the wrong bar. She looked like a woman who had come in to get out of the wind. That was what Dillard saw. That was what all of them saw. Merle Tanner, behind the taps, saw something else. Tanner was 62. He had a faded trident inked on his forearm, the ink gone soft and green with the decades, and he had owned this bar for 30 years and worked it every night of them. He had poured for men who had done things that never made the news and never would. He had learned a long time ago that the loudest men in a room were almost never the ones who had done the most. He had learned to watch the quiet ones. He was watching her now. He had watched her come in an hour before, alone. He had watched her choose, without seeming to choose, the one stool that saw the front door and the kitchen pass at the same time. He had watched her order a club soda and nurse it and never look at her phone, because there was no phone. He had watched her not startle when the door banged, not once, though every young man at Dillard's table jumped a little each time and laughed it off. She sat with a stillness Tanner had only ever seen in a handful of people in his life. Every one of them had earned it somewhere he did not like to think about. Dillard waited for her to flinch. She set the glass down. She turned her head, unhurried, and she looked at him, and she said it again. The same words, the same flat voice, without heat and without fear. "The ridge runs north," she said, "not east." The table laughed, because Dillard laughed, and because that was the arrangement. But Tanner, behind the bar, slowly put down the glass he had been drying, and he did not pick up another. He set both hands flat on the wood, and he watched the last stool, and the old cold feeling he had not felt in years began, very quietly, to climb up the back of his neck. He had felt it maybe 5 times in 30 years behind this bar, that exact cold, and every time it had meant the same thing, that somewhere in his room, unannounced, unremarkable, nursing a single drink and asking for nothing, was a person who had been to the far edge of what people do to each other and come back, and carried it now the way you carry a thing that has no bottom. You did not see them. That was the whole point of them. They had spent years learning not to be seen, and they were very good at it, and the only ones who ever picked them out of a room were the men who had learned the same trick and could recognize it being done. Tanner had learned the trick, and Tanner was looking, right now, at somebody who had learned it better than he ever had. Dillard decided she was a bit he could run all night. He came off his stool and walked down the length of the bar to her, easy, loose, playing to the table over his shoulder as he went. He put both forearms on the wood beside her and leaned in, the way a man settles in for a long joke he intends to enjoy. "Okay," he said. "I'll play. What outfit were you in? What did you do that you know so much about a ridge in a country you've never seen?" She answered without looking at him. Her voice was low and even. She used one word. "Enough." "Enough," he repeated, grinning at the table. "She says enough." A minute before, he had named a piece of gear and gotten it wrong, the way men do when they are repeating a story that traveled through 3 other mouths before it reached theirs. She corrected it now. She gave him the full name of the thing, the whole nomenclature, flat and exact, the way a person says a word they have said 1,000 times in the dark with their hands. She did not do it to win. She did it the way you straighten a picture on a wall as you pass it. Dillard blinked. He had not expected the correction, and he had not expected it to be right. And for half a second, the grin slipped before he caught it. "Listen to this," he told the table, louder now, covering. "We got ourselves a real operator over here." Across the room, a busboy lost his grip on a bus tray, and it went down in a crash of glass and steel that cracked through the room like a shot. The whole table came half out of its chairs. Kovac barked a curse and then laughed at himself for it. Every young man in the place jumped and then sat back down, grinning to cover the jump, the way young men do. The woman did not jump, but her eyes moved. In the half-second of the crash, they went to the front door, then to the kitchen pass, then to the fire exit by the restrooms, and then back down to her glass. And the whole circuit took less time than it takes to blink twice. She did it without turning her head. She did it the way a person checks the safety on a weapon they are already holding, out of a habit worn so deep it is no longer a decision, so deep it happens before thought. Tanner saw it. He had seen exactly that before, in men who never talked about why they did it. He set a fresh club soda in front of her that she had not ordered, and he leaned down, and he said one word. "Mom." It was not a waiter's word. It was not the word a bartender gives a paying customer. It was the word a man gives an officer, and it came out of him before he had decided to say it, the way an old reflex will fire in the presence of the thing it was built for. She met his eyes then, for the first time all night, and something passed between them, brief and complete, and entirely without words. He did not know her name. He knew her kind. He gave her the smallest nod, and she gave it back, and that was all. And it was everything. Dillard, needing to keep the room, lifted his beer. "To the Admiral," he said, and the table drank to it, laughing, and she let the name land on her and said nothing at all. But her right hand, Tanner noticed, had come off the glass and settled low against the edge of the bar, loose and open and free, and it stayed there. Tanner had seen a hand rest like that exactly once before. It had belonged to a man who came in every Thursday for 11 years and drank 2 beers and never spoke to anyone, and who had, one time only, told Tanner what the hand was for, late, near closing, in a voice with nothing left in it. Tanner had never forgotten the telling, and he had never repeated it, and he knew now, watching the last stool, that he was in the presence of the same thing again. He wiped the same 6 inches of bar he had already wiped. He kept his hands busy so that he would not do something with them that he could not take back. Dillard, meanwhile, had decided the silence was a challenge to be beaten rather than a warning to be heard. He tried a new angle. He asked her, with the elaborate patience of a man explaining a thing to a child, whether she was lost, whether she had meant to come here, whether someone was coming to pick her up. She let each question go by without answering, and each one that went unanswered made him louder, because a joke that lands on nothing has to get bigger to survive, and his was starting to run out of air. Reed Kovach brought his beer down the bar and joined in. Kovach was 24 and built like a door, and he leaned on the wood on her other side, so that she sat boxed between the two of them, Dillard on the left and Kovach on the right, a wall of young muscle on either shoulder. He grinned down at her. "Come on, Admiral," he said. "One sea story. You owe the table one good one." Dillard told his. "Least you can do." She said nothing. He grinned wider, because the nothing was starting to get at him, and he didn't want it to show. There is a kind of silence that costs the men around it something, and this was that kind, and Kovach was beginning to pay without knowing he had opened an account. At the table, the youngest of them was not laughing. Jonah Pratt was 22 and new to the teams, and he had been watching the woman for a while now without understanding why. He had noticed one small thing and could not put it down. She never reached for her drink with her right hand. The right stayed low, near the edge of the bar, loose and free, always free. The left did all the work. He did not know what it meant. It bothered him the way a wrong note bothers you a full second before you can name which one it was. He thought about the free hand and the chosen seat, and he thought about the way she had not jumped at the tray, and he tried to fit those 3 things together into a picture of an ant who had wandered into the wrong bar, and they would not fit. He was young and he was new, but he was not stupid, and the picture the others were laughing at was not the picture the evidence was drawing. He kept his mouth shut and he kept watching, and the watching made him uneasy in a way he could not have explained to Kovach if Kovach had asked, which Kovach would not, because Kovach was busy being loud. Dillard, on her right now as well as her left in spirit, kept up the performance. He asked her to guess his rate. He asked her to guess how many jumps he had. He narrated her silence back to the table as though it were a comedy he was providing, and the table gave him the laughs because the table always gave him the laughs. But the laughs were coming a half-beat slower now and a half-beat quieter, and somewhere underneath them the floor of the evening had begun, very slowly, to tilt. Dillard slapped his palm flat on the bar, hard, an inch from her glass, to make her flinch. The glass did not so much as ring, neither did she. The laughter in the room thinned. A pair of older regulars at a corner table found somewhere else to look, down into their beers, embarrassed for the boys, and not sure why. There is a kind of quiet that spreads out from a person who will not be moved, and it was spreading now, out from the last stool, filling the low room like water filling a hull, and the young men at the center of it could feel the level rising, even though not one of them could have said what it was. Tanner spoke across the bar, low and even. "Son, ease off." Dillard waved a hand at him without turning. The bartender was an old man with a faded tattoo and a rag over his shoulder. What did he know? Tanner's jaw set, and he said nothing more, and he moved the short bat he kept under the register a few inches closer to his hand. He noticed, as he did it, that he was not moving it to protect her. He understood that with a cold clarity that surprised him. If it came to it, the bat was for them. It was to keep 6 young men from doing something to her that would end their careers, because he was almost certain, now, that she could end all 6 of them before he cleared the end of the bar, and that the only thing in the room stopping her was her own decision not to. Dillard leaned in close enough that she could smell the beer on his breath. He was certain now that he had won, that the silence was fear and the stillness was weakness, and that all he had to do was push a little harder, and she would break, and the table would roar, and the night would be his. She had not moved. She was looking at him with a calm so total it was almost gentle, the calm of a person looking at weather. If you have ever watched the young mistake a quiet person for a small one, stay with this one, and subscribe to the Veteran Vault. It turned from a joke into something else between one breath and the next. Dillard hooked the toe of his boot in the rung of her stool and jerked it sideways, hard, meaning to spill her drink into her lap and her dignity onto the floor in front of everyone. She rode the motion. The stool skidded a foot across the plank, and she went with it, easy, weightless, and the glass came down onto the bar in front of her without losing a single drop. The table went, oh, the low sound men make at a hit landing, and Tanner started around the end of the bar with the rag still in his fist. Then Dillard put his hand on her. He closed it around her upper arm, above the elbow, and he said, "All right, Admiral, up you go. Bars for people who actually served." And he began to liver her off the stool and steer her toward the door. She let him move her. She came off the stool and took one step where he pushed her, and in that single step, she read the whole of it. The grip and where it was weak, the angle of his wrist, his balance sitting back on his heels, the exact distance to the door, the precise place each of the other 3 men was standing, the bottle within reach of Kovach's hand, the space behind her. She read it all in the time it took to take the step, the way a person reads a page they have read 1,000 times, without effort, without even the awareness of reading. She could have ended it there. She could have put him face down on the plank floor in the time it takes to breathe out. She did not. At the booth by the window, a young couple discovered their phones and became very interested in them. Kovach laughed, but the laugh had gone thin and gone high, because even Kovach, who understood the least of anyone there, could feel that something was badly wrong with how unafraid she was, and he did not have the words for the wrongness of it. Fear has a smell, and men who work in dangerous places learn it early, learn it in themselves and in each other. And its absence has a smell too, a colder one, and Kovach's animal was reading that colder smell now and did not like it. She should have been afraid. A woman her age, boxed between 2 large young men, handled and steered toward a door. She should have been afraid, and she was not. And the not being of it was worse than any threat she could have made, because a threat can be answered, and this could not. There was nothing to push against. She had given him nothing to push against all night. It was like leaning your whole weight on a door and finding the room on the other side simply gone. She spoke to Dillard then, quietly, only for him. "You don't want to do this," she said. "Not for my sake. For yours." He heard the strange grammar of it a beat too late, the way she had put his welfare ahead of her own, the way a person does when the outcome is not in doubt to them, and the only open question is how much it is going to cost the other man. It did not fit anything he understood about a person he was manhandling toward a door. Something in the base of his skull, some animal part older than his certainty, went quietly cold. Tanner reached them. He stepped in and put himself between them, both palms up, and his voice came out flat and hard and very sure. "Petty officer, take your hand off her. Now." Dillard froze for half a second. Not at the command, at the word. Petty officer. His exact rate, spoken by an old man behind a bar who had no way on earth to know it. No name tape on the woman. No uniform in the room. Nothing to read it from. How did the bartender know his rate? How did the bartender know it cold? His hand was still on her arm. Tanner was a foot away. The whole bar was holding its breath. And behind them, the front door opened and let in a wedge of blue dusk and the smell of the harbor, and a broad silhouette that not one of them had yet turned to look at. Tanner did not reach for the bat. He reached for the truth instead, which he had learned somewhere along the 30 years was the heavier of the two. He kept his eyes on Dillard, and he said it low, so it was only for the young man, so it could not be performed for the table. I've been pouring for the teams since before you could walk. I have seen that stillness maybe 5 times in 30 years. 5. And every single man who had it had done the things you sit here telling stories about. And not one of them, not one, ever told a story. You want to know why she won't give you a sea story? Because the ones who lived the real ones don't sell them for a laugh in a bar. Dillard scoffed, but his hand loosened, 1 degree. The woman, still half off the stool, still held by the arm, finished the story he had mangled an hour before. She did it quietly, without triumph, the way a person recites something they carry rather than something they perform. She named the valley. She named the direction the ridge actually ran. North, the same correction she had murmured at the television, the correction that had started all of it. She named the weather that night, the cold with no wind in it, and the dark with no moon in it. She named the way the exfil had actually gone, which was not the way Dillard had told it, because Dillard had it third hand, from a man who had it from a man, and she had it from the mountain itself, from the rock under her own hands. It was not a civilian's knowledge. It was not a thing anyone knows who was not standing inside it. Kovac went quiet. The grin was gone off him entirely now, and what was left underneath it was a young man beginning to be afraid of a thing he could not see. One of the older regulars in the corner set down his beer and stood up, not to intervene, only because a man of his years cannot stay seated in the presence of a thing like that, and he took his cap off, which no one but Tanner understood yet. He had been in a different war a long time ago, and he did not know who she was, but he knew what she was, the same way Tanner did, the same way an old dog knows another old dog across a field, and taking the cap off was the only thing his body knew to do about it. I've had men sit at this bar, Tanner went on, still low, still only for Dillard, who had done things that would keep you up at night just from the hearing of them, and every one of them ordered a club soda and sat where they could see the door and never told me a thing. You've been in, what, 4 years? 5? You've got time to learn this. Most men do learn it, eventually. The lucky ones learn it from an old bartender. The rest learn it the hard way. I'd take the bartender, if I were you. It's about to get a lot more expensive than a beer. At the table, Jonah Pratt stood up. He had remembered something. In the team room, on the wall by the door, there was a display case, and in the case, there was a grainy night photograph and a name cut into a small brass plate beneath it, and a citation under glass that he had walked past 100 times without reading. He stood now, without deciding to stand, his chair scraping back loud in the silence, and his young face had changed all the way through, because he was beginning, only beginning, to understand what he was looking at. The broad man at the door stepped forward into the light. He was older, gray at the temples, heavy through the shoulders, and he carried himself the way a man carries himself when the deck of a ship has belonged to him and everyone on it. Tanner saw him first, and something in Tanner's chest let go all at once, a long breath he had not known he had been holding for the last 10 minutes. He knew that walk. Every man who had ever been near the teams knew that walk. It was the walk of a Master Chief, and a Master Chief does not hurry because the world has learned to wait for him. The man's eyes moved across the room, unhurried, taking inventory the way such men always take inventory, cataloging the exits and the threats and the fools out of 30 years of habit. And they stopped on the woman on the last stool, and every muscle in his face changed at once. What the boy with his hand on her arm did not yet know is what the next 60 seconds would teach him. Subscribe so you do not miss it. The mountain was in eastern Afghanistan, and the night was in the year 2015, and it had no moon. An assault team was pinned in a draw on the far side of a ridge, taking fire from the high ground above them, and the only way to reach them was up the wrong side of the mountain in the dark. 800 meters of broken rock with men shooting down it. The quick reaction element was standing at the base of it, and it needed an officer to lead it up. The officer who took it was the newest one they had. She was 26 years old. Her call sign was Sable. She was the newest officer they had, and the only one who did not hesitate. The two facts were not unrelated. The old hands hesitated because they had learned exactly what a mountain like that could take from a man. She had not learned it yet. She would learn it that night, all of it in a single lesson, and it would never leave her. They went up under fire. She made the calls that kept them alive, where to bound and when to hold, which spur to take and which to leave alone, reading the mountain in the muzzle flashes above, as though she had climbed it in daylight 100 times. She moved low, and she moved smart, and she never once raised her voice. And the men behind her found that the flat steadiness of it in their ears was worth more than any shouting could have been. Among them was a chief named Bracken, older, steady, a man who had been up more bad hills than he could count. Bracken would say, years later, and more than once, that he watched a young lieutenant become something on that slope, in the dark, with the rounds walking down the rock toward them. He did not have a word for what she became. He only knew that after that night he would have followed her up anything. Halfway up, the fire found them. It came down off a shoulder of rock to their right, and it pinned the front of the element flat against the slope, and for a long 10 seconds it looked as if the mountain had won, and they would die strung out across it in the dark. Then Sable's voice came down the line, flat and unhurried, telling them exactly where to move and exactly when, breaking the 10 seconds into pieces small enough to survive one at a time. Move now. Hold. 2 more meters, on me. Hold. She read the shooter's rhythm off the muzzle flashes the way another person reads the pauses in a conversation, and she walked the whole element up through the gaps in it, and not one of them was hit on the climb, and every man who came down alive knew whose calm had done it. They reached the pinned team. They began pulling men back off the exposed rock, one at a time, passing them down the line hand to hand toward the low ground. Petty Officer First Class Aaron Whitlock took a round pulling the last man to cover. He was 27 years old. He had a wife at home and a daughter 8 months old, whose weight he still talked about, how she was getting heavy, how she was going to be tall. He went down hard on the rock, and he did not get up. And Sable got a hand on him, and she did not let go. There was no time, and there was no good ground, and there was nothing to do but carry him. So she carried him. She got him up across her back, and she brought him down the mountain through the last of the fire, 800 meters of broken rock in the dark, and the whole way down she talked to him in a low, steady voice that never once changed pitch, told him about the aid station, told him about his daughter, told him he was not allowed to quit, kept the words coming so that if he could hear anything at all, the last thing he heard would be a voice that was not afraid. She did not stop talking when his weight changed on her back. She did not stop talking when the men around her went quiet, in the way that means they already know. She talked him all the way down the mountain and across the low ground and up to the litter, because as long as she was talking, She had not yet admitted the thing her hands already knew, and she wasn't ready to admit it. And some part of her would never be entirely ready to admit it for the rest of her life. He did not make it to the aid station. The citation would use the word valor. She would only ever use the word Aaron. They gave her the Navy Cross for that night, the second highest decoration the Navy has for courage, one step below the highest there is. And she took it home and she put it in a drawer, and the drawer stayed shut. The medal was a footnote. The name was the thing. There is a difference, and only the people who have carried someone down a mountain ever really learn it. Dawn came up gray and cold over the ridge. The survivors were alive because of her. Whitlock was gone in spite of her. And the young lieutenant sat apart from the others in the flat gray light, saying nothing, her hands loose and empty in her lap, already learning to hold very, very still. Because stillness, she was discovering, was the only place large enough to put a thing like that, and she was going to be putting things like that there for the rest of her life. The bar had not moved in the time the mountain took to tell it. Dillard, humiliated by an old bartender in front of the table, feeling the room turn against him and not understanding the mechanism of it, did the one thing a cornered young man does when he is out of good moves. He tried to take it back by force. He needed the room to laugh again. He needed the last 10 minutes not to have happened. It would not laugh again. Not tonight. He yanked her fully off the stool by the arm, hard, meaning to march her the last 20 feet to the door and be done with the whole strange business. She came off the stool, balanced. Her weight was already right, already under her, already exactly where it needed to be. And every man in that room who knew anything at all saw the difference between a person being pulled off a stool and a person choosing to leave one. It is a small difference, and it is the whole difference, and Kovacs, who was closest, saw it plain. For one instant her free hand rose. It came up off the edge of the bar, and it found, without her looking at it, without any apparent thought at all, the exact angle and height that would have put Dillard face down on the plank floor, with his wrist folded the wrong way and his shoulder screaming, and no effort spent worth the name. It hung there in the air for the length of a single heartbeat, a promise, fully formed. Then she lowered it. She set it back against the edge of the bar. She chose the stillness again, the way she had been choosing it for 11 years, one decision at a time. That was the thing none of them would ever fully grasp. Not the boys at the table, and not the couple by the window, and maybe not even Tanner, who came closest. The stillness was not the absence of the storm. The stillness was the storm, held. Every second she sat there and did nothing was a second she was choosing, deliberately, at cost, not to. People thought a person like her was calm because there was nothing in her. It was the opposite. There was everything in her, all of it. The whole mountain and the whole night, and the weight of a man on her back. And she had built the stillness the way you build a wall around a fire, not to put it out, but to keep it from taking the house. Kovacs had seen the hand rise and stop. He went pale under his tan, because he understood, finally and completely, that the only thing that had kept his friend upright and whole for the last 10 minutes was this woman's ongoing decision to allow it. Dillard had been standing the entire time inside a house she had chosen not to knock down. "Sit down, petty officer," she said softly. "Please, while it is still your choice." From the door came a single word. It was quiet, and it was absolute, and it laid itself flat across the whole room like a blade set down on a table. "Sable?" Dillard froze at the strange word, not knowing it, feeling only that the temperature of the room had dropped 10 degrees. And the woman's head turned, slowly, toward a voice she had not heard in 11 years, and for the first time all night, something moved behind her eyes. Master Chief Lemuel Bracken crossed the floor. He stopped 6 feet from her, and he went rigid, not to attention, not yet. But the whole body of a man who has walked in out of the dusk to find a ghost he owes his life to sitting on a bar stool with a boy's hand clamped on her arm. He looked at her face, and 11 years fell off it, and the mountain came up into his eyes, plain for anyone who knew how to read a man. "I carried a stretcher down off that mountain because of you, Lieutenant," he said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The room had gone so quiet the ice machine sounded like surf on rocks. "Every man in my old troop went home because of you. Their kids are alive because of you. Kids that only exist because a lieutenant nobody had heard of, yet went up the wrong side of a hill in the dark when the rest of us were still doing the math." He let that sit. Then he said the rest of it, quieter, because the rest of it was hers and not his to spend loudly. She carried Whitlock down 800 meters on her back, under fire the whole way, talking to him so he wouldn't be alone in it. I was 10 feet behind her the whole way down, and I have never in my life heard a voice stay that steady over a thing that broke every one of us who heard it. They gave her the Navy Cross for it. You know what she did with it? Nothing. She never mentions it. You had to drag a bar out of the way just to find out she'd ever served. And the reason you had to drag is that people who have actually paid the price don't spend it buying laughs from children. He turned his head, just enough to take in the room, and he told them what they were looking at, because he could see that not one of them knew. He said her name. Lieutenant Solano. He said her call sign, Sable, and then he let it sit there in the silence so the weight of it could settle. He said the year and the mountain and the 800 meters of rock. He said the name Aaron Whitlock, and he said what she had done to earn the 2 words she never said herself. And then he said the 2 words, Navy Cross. And then Master Chief Lemuel Bracken, 30 years and more in the teams, came fully to attention in the middle of a dive bar, in front of a woman on a stool, and he held it, and his hand came up in a salute that did not waver. Behind the bar, Tanner straightened too. He did not decide to. His body did it for him, 30 years late, and right on time. Dillard's face went through all of it in order, and the room watched it go. First the smirk, still there out of pure habit, still waiting for the punchline that was not coming. Then confusion at the strange word, Sable, that had stood a Master Chief up straight. Then the slow and terrible dawning as the pieces came down into place one after another. The corrections that had all been correct, the stillness he had read as weakness, the eyes that had found every exit in the room, the hand that had risen and chosen not to fall, and his own fingers, still, even now, closed around her arm. Then horror, complete and total, the horror of a young man who has just understood exactly what he has done, and to whom. He let go of her arm as if it had turned to a stove burner. I didn't, he said. No, she said, you didn't. One by one, the men in the room stood up. Pratt was already on his feet, had been for a while. Kovac rose, ashen, his beer forgotten and sweating on the wood. The 2 older regulars in the corner stood. The whole room that had laughed at her not an hour before came up onto its feet in a silence you could have leaned against, and it stayed there. And the only person still seated in the entire place was the woman they were all standing for, who had never once, in the whole long night, raised her voice above the level of a person ordering a club soda. The consequences were quiet, and they were total, which is the only way consequences ever really land. Bracken turned to Dillard, and he did not shout. Shouting was for small things, and this was not a small thing. I'm going to talk to your chief, he said, level and unhurried. And you are going to stand in front of him, and you are going to tell him exactly what you did in here tonight. All of it. Every word. Every time you put your hand on her. And you are not going to leave one piece of it out to make yourself look better." Dillard nodded. He was wrecked, and he was trying not to show that he was wrecked, and failing, because there is no way to hide it at 25. "You don't get chewed out for this, son," Bracken said, and his voice changed, went from iron to something almost like mercy. "That would be too easy. You get to remember it. Every single day you wear that trident, you get to remember that you put your hand on the person who earned the right to hand it to you. That's the price, and I promise you, it is cheaper than the one she paid for the thing you were mocking." Then Dillard turned to the woman, and he tried to apologize, and it came apart in his mouth halfway out. He was 25, and he had never in his life been so completely and publicly wrong about anything, and there are no words built for that. None. And he stood there in the wreckage of his certainty with his mouth working and nothing coming. She looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, it was without anger. There had never been any anger in her all night, and that was the one thing not a single one of them had understood until now, that the stillness had never been the lid on a temper. There was no temper under it. There was only what was left after the temper had been burned all the way out of a person, years ago, on a mountain. "You are a kid who hasn't lost anyone yet," she said. "When you do, and you will, because everyone does, you'll understand why the quiet ones are quiet. You'll understand it all at once, in a single night, and you'll spend the rest of your life the way I've spent mine. Until then, be better. That's all I want from you. Not an apology. Just be better than you were tonight." She turned to Bracken, and she shook her head. Once, and waved off the rest of it. The report, the standing in front of the chief, the whole machinery of reckoning she could have set, turning with a word. She had carried a man down a mountain on her back. She was not going to carry a grudge up a barstool. Honor the ones who carry it in silence. Subscribe to the veteran vault, and let this story find the people who need it. First light came gray and clean over the base the next morning, and the memorial wall stood empty of everyone but her. It was a long, low wall of dark, polished stone, with rows of names cut into it, and she walked the rows the way you walk them when you know exactly where you are going and have walked there many times. She stopped. She raised her hand and rested 2 fingers on a name cut into the stone at the height of her eyes. Aaron Whitlock. She did not speak. She did not need to. She had said everything she had to say to him 11 years ago on a mountain, in a low voice that never changed pitch, and she came here in the gray mornings to keep saying the part of it that had never had any words to begin with. The medal was in a drawer in a house across town. The name was on the wall. She visited the wall. That was the whole arrangement of her life, and she had made her peace with it, or something near enough to peace to live inside. She thought about the boy in the bar, the way she thought about all of them eventually, without heat. He would be all right. That was the part the young ones never believed when you told them, that the person they had wronged did not actually wish them harm, that the wish for harm was a luxury that had been burned out of her along with everything else on that ridge. He would learn. He would lose someone one day, the way everyone does. And on that day, he would remember a woman on a bar stool who would not raise her voice, and he would finally understand what he had been laughing at, and the understanding would make him gentler with the next quiet person he met. That was the only justice she wanted. It was the only kind that ever changed anything. A gull went over, low, calling. The light came up another degree behind the stone. Behind her, at a respectful distance, a young man had come and stopped. It was Pratt, the one who had never laughed, the one who had stood up before he understood why. He did not speak to her. He did not intrude on it. He only stood there in the gray light, a little apart, his hands folded in front of him, keeping quiet watch over a woman who had spent her entire life keeping it over other people. Learning, without anyone teaching him, without a single word passing between them, how the thing is done, and why, and at what cost. Some warriors fade quietly into the years, but the valor never leaves them. Honor the ones who carry it in silence. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to the Veteran Vault for more.